All right, everyone. Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I am joined by Matt Moreno tonight. And Matt, I don't know. I want to start with this. I don't know when you officially do something like this. I made a slight executive decision, but I think this is episode 1 of season number 2 of DodgerHeads. What do you think? Does season 1 end with recaps, or does season 2 start with spring training? I don't know how you do these things.
Yeah, it's always kind of tricky, and we encounter this hurdle with our writing. You know, do we refer to the 2020 season as last season or this season? I think typically what we've done in the past is once we get to the calendar, January 2021, we'll then refer to anything in 2020 as last season.
Got it.
So, in terms of the show, I'll leave that up to you.
I want to also suggest that the 2020 season should just be referred to as this season indefinitely from now on. It never needs to go to the past. I think we need to it needs to remain in the present tense until the very last second possible. That's just my suggestion. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean the championship season, right?
Yeah.
And on Tuesday, when probably a lot of our viewers are going to be watching this, it'll be 3 weeks since the Dodgers won the World Series.
Yeah, and Nike will still not have any World Series gear. They will all still be listed as coming soon. But I'll keep my problems to myself here. Well, we've got a good show for you tonight. Whether it's still season 1 or season 2 of Dodgerhead, it's going to be a good one tonight. We're going to do a quick rundown of some Major League Baseball awards that have come out in the last couple of weeks. But most of our time is going to be spent on free agency, breaking down not only our predictions for what we think the Dodgers will do, but also some talk about what I would do, what Matt would do if we were in charge. We'll get to some Hall of Fame voting, some Major League Baseball news. They announced the 2021 Hall of Fame ballot today with some former Dodgers on there. And then Mookie Betts exploring a new career path, potentially. So stay tuned for that at the end of the show. But we'll start with award season. We knew the Dodgers would be heavily involved. I don't know what the expectations were for most Dodger fans about whether they would hear a Dodgers name called. But when it comes to MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, etc., there were lots of Dodgers featured. And we'll start at the top, the National League MVP. The winner of that award was Freddie Freeman, but Mookie Betts did finish second place. He did get 2 first-place votes, 21 second-place votes. I'll mention that Corey Seager also finished 9th. That's a funny one to me. We could talk a little bit. I wrote Mookie Betts. I said his MVP odds were dead with like a month and a half left in the season. And then Tatis, who I was so far ahead of everybody else, went on like an 0 for 40 streak, and a different guy won. So it tells you how much I know. But Mookie finishes second in MVP, Seager 9th. In the Cy Young Award, we've got Trevor Bauer gets 27 out of 30 first-place votes. He wins that pretty easily. Clayton Kershaw ties for 9th. It's his 9th top 10 finish in Cy Young voting, which is pretty remarkable. Rookie of the Year, this was the most popular if you're a Dodger fan. I mean, Rookie of the Year is almost the most important award when it comes to history and the franchise itself. We didn't win this year, but Gonsolin finished 4th with 1 first-place vote. Dustin May finished 5th with a pair of second-place votes. Manager of the Year, former Dodger Don Mattingly takes home first in that. Dave Roberts finished 5th. He did get 1 first-place vote. And then the Gold Glove. Gold Glove, Mookie Betts was the only winner. He also took home the only Silver Slugger Award for the Dodgers. There is an organization that hands out the Fielding Bible Awards. Mookie Betts won that as well for right field. Kike Hernandez as a multi-positional guy for the Dodgers. So I'm curious, Matt, as you look through, again, I don't know if there were any major surprises, but what were your reactions when you came across all those awards?
And for the most part, it kind of went as expected for me. And I'll try to remember the order you went in. I know you started MVP. Mookie Betts being a finalist wasn't surprising at all. Freddie Freeman winning it also wasn't a surprise. I was a little shocked that Corey Seager finished so low on the list, just because, I mean, if you watch the Dodgers this season, which obviously you did and I did very closely, you knew how important Seager was to the team. And really, the Dodgers sort of kind of took off, and Mookie on an individual level, once they settled on leaving him in the leadoff spot. And what that ended up predicating on was Corey Seager coming back from his back injury and batting second the rest of the way. I mean, we say that, but it was, one more month in the season or whatever the case was. So that surprised me a little bit. I thought he would have finished a little higher. Not a top three finalist, but maybe in the fifth or sixth range.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny because once you get past the top four, I think Machado and Tatis finishing third and fourth, it's pretty much simple. And let me say real quick, Freddie Freeman had an absolutely insane year. I joked he can have the MVP. We'll take the World Series. But, I mean, he had a 1.1 OPS on the season. He had an on-base percentage of almost 500 for the entirety, of course, of a shortened year, but a 3.4 wins above replacement. Like, that looks like a full season number for most guys. He did that in 60 games. So absolutely insane from him. But yeah, to your point, I mean, once you get past the top four, it's kind of a crapshoot. Juan Soto finished fifth, Marcelo Ozuna sixth, Trey Turner seventh. Mike Yastrzemski finished eighth above Corey Seager, which I think tells you everything you need to know about how legit it gets. Obviously, the NL MVP voting became sort of a joke because Ryan Tepera, a relief pitcher for the Chicago Cubs, took home a 10th place vote. I believe the voter went back and said, I meant to vote for Trey Turner, and I accidentally clicked the wrong name. But everybody, I think, Googled who was this relief pitcher with the 3.8 ERA this year who gets a 10th place vote. But, I mean, Brandon Belt got a 9th place vote. I mean, it's a pretty pathetic list once you get – I mean, these are good players, but, like, Brandon Belt would be the 8th best player on the Dodgers. The fact that he's getting an MVP vote, I think, is sort of a joke, which makes it hard to, again, to your point, once you get past the first 3 or 4, it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just kind of breeze through these a little bit. Cy Young wasn't much of a surprise. Frankly, I wasn't sure if the Dodgers really would have anybody kind of appear on the final ballot. I mean, that one ended up running pretty deep. There are a lot of pitchers who got votes. Kershaw obviously had on top of it being a shortened season, his was even shorter because of his back injury to begin the year.
Yeah.
No surprise there. Rookie of the year, I thought maybe the Dodgers would have a finalist between Gonsolin or May, just because they both were key for the team this year, and I thought it would be enough for one of them to finish in the top 3. The most surprise I had will come with manager of the year. Not so much that I expected Dave Roberts to win it, but I didn't expect David Ross to be the third finalist. To me, the award was very clearly going to go to Don Mattingly, and he deserves it for, A, the Marlins exceeded expectations, B, they dealt with an outbreak that nearly shut the season down, and then on top of all that, made the playoffs and swept the Cubs. So I expected him to win all along. I expected Jace Tingler to be a finalist as well. I thought Brian Snitker was going to be the third finalist.
Yeah, and he finished fourth, I believe.
Right, and had that been the case, it would have been fine. But David Ross getting in there, I thought that surprised me, and then it made me feel even worse for Dave Roberts, even though he will take the World Series trophy over another manager of the year.
He probably didn't even know they were announcing it. I will say, David Ross, one of my favorite Dodgers. I couldn't tell you why he's one of my favorite Dodgers of all time, but he was a catcher and the guy hit bombs. So shout out to David Ross. I'm not saying I disagree with anything you just said, other than that I loved David Ross when I was a kid, and I don't know why. So, but Gold Glove. I mean, Gold Glove was the one place that I think if the Dodgers were going to have a beef, that was it. Trent Grisham takes home the Gold Glove in center field over Cody Bellinger. I think that's probably where I saw the most outrage. Admittedly, I didn't watch a ton of Trent Grisham when they weren't playing the Dodgers. Defensive metrics can be such a mess. I mean, I think Cody Bellinger is as good of a defensive center fielder as you will find. But I can't say I know enough about Trent Grisham to have a real beef that he was significantly worse. But again, I mean, obviously I'm rooting for Cody Bellinger to win those awards, and I think I would have had no issue if he had.
Yeah, 100%. When we were writing, I frankly thought that Cody and Mookie were both going to win. Obviously, Mookie did. But then in writing that Trent Grisham won and looking at the numbers, advanced metrics I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head, but they did not favor Bellinger at all. I mean, he did not grade well. And I remember looking at Trent Grisham's and thinking, man, no wonder he won this award, because obviously they changed kind of the voting process this year. They only relied on that as opposed to in-person votes, because managers and coaches aren't seeing these players with the way the schedule was set up. So I guess because of that, I can understand it. Still, the eye test to me, I mean, is I don't think there's a center than Bellinger, and if there is, he might be playing right field for the Dodgers.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard, right? Because all of this comes out after the postseason when you see Cody Bellinger make the plays that he makes. So it's like, it doesn't help the situation when you haven't seen, I mean, the award should have been theoretically already decided. And then Bellinger goes and robs a home run in the series against Grisham. He makes some amazing plays throughout the entire postseason. So that always makes things more complicated, right? Even Mookie Betts playing the way he did. I mean, Freddie Freeman played better than Mookie Betts did in the NLCS, at least. So there's not really issues there. But that always is a crack up to me when these regular season awards don't get announced till so much later. And it's you've seen months and plenty of other games, especially in a 60-game season. I mean, the Dodgers had then played another 18 games. So it's like a third of the season just tacked on to the end of it. So it's always a challenge. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, right, like the Dodgers won the World Series. If any Dodger fan is getting fired up about these things, like, I mean, enjoy, go Google World Series, right? Go listen to our recap of the NLCS or something, and just remember that the only thing that really matters in baseball is the Dodgers right now, and just bask in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's move on, because that's the past, and not, again, we're not trying to move past this last season. We want to enjoy it and embrace it, but let's look ahead to free agency, because I think, in any sport, even though we've won the World Series in this season, the free agency is always interesting, especially if you're the Dodgers, because there's potential for trades. They're always in the mix for any guy. I mean, you look at the top free agents, and the Dodgers are going to be rumored to connected to every single one of them. And so I'd love to have a conversation with you and just say, hey, what do we think about all this? So let me frame this up really quick and talk about the salary cap for a moment, okay? Because in order to understand what the Dodgers might do, what we think they'll do, what we predict they'll do, we have to understand where they are at financially. So I'm gonna use luxury tax numbers. I was joking with Matt off air. When you go to Spot Track and look at this stuff, there's like 6 columns with 6 different numbers. The luxury tax number is just like total dollars divided by how many years, and that's like what we're going with here, okay? But here is where the Dodgers are at entering the next season. So their top 2 guys are the same guys as last year. Mookie Betts, Clayton Kershaw both make about $31 million a year. Jansen, Dodger fans aren't going to like to hear this. He's the number 3 guy on the list at $16 million a year. New this year, you've got David Price back on the books for $15 million, Pollock at 12, Muncy at 9, Kelly at 8, Taylor at 8. Okay, then you've got some arbitration estimates. You're like, wait a minute, we're missing some names there. Bellinger estimated to be making estimated he'll make $13 million this year. Seager 12, Buehler 3, Urias 2, Barnes 1.5. Everybody else on the roster right now is currently under $1 million. Okay, so that's where the Dodgers, if you add those up, they've got about $160 million committed to next season's roster. Last year, that number was about $183 million. So how did we get from 183 to 160? Well, you lose Treinen, you lose Turner, you lose Peterson, Baez, Kike. Those guys add up to about $50 million. You tack on Price's 15. That's roughly how you get to the place of where we're at. So as we look at those numbers, keep in mind that to assume the Dodgers are going to spend as much or more than they did last season might be a fool's errand because of the fact that there are no fans in the stands. And yes, the Dodgers are a big market team, and yes, the Dodgers have very rich owners, but the Dodgers also have the most fans that come to their games. So if any team was hurt, like the Dodgers lost more money by losing fans than any other team in baseball, and it's not even close. So keep that in mind, okay? Now, all of that said, for the sake of fun and for the sake of entertainment for you all, but more importantly for me and for Matt, I think, I want to do an exercise here. So we're at 160, last year 183. So as we walk through these free agents, I want you to just keep in your mind that the Dodgers would roughly have about $25 million to spend if they were to just get to the same place they were last year, which would be below the luxury tax line for what it's worth. So that's the $23 million I mentioned. Let's say, hey, if you want to get creative and make some room, they could renounce the rights to a guy like Scott Alexander or Dylan Floro and get to 25, okay? So just keep that $25 million number in the back of your head because we're going to go through Dodgers free agents. We're going to go through big name free agents. We're going to go through trade potential. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask Matt if you had $25 million, how you'd spend it, okay? So the Dodgers and free agents. The Dodgers we'll start with a conversation with the 7 guys who were on the roster last year who are currently free agents. As it stands, the Dodgers have somewhere between 7 and 8 40-man spots. I can never keep track of how those things work because David Price opts in, Caleb Ferguson's back on, etc. 7 or 8. Figure in 3 or 4 of those are going to be filled by a guy they're protecting in the Rule 5 draft, and we'll go from here. Okay, so the first one, the biggest one, is Justin Turner. MLB Trade Rumors projects that Justin Turner is going to sign a contract worth $24 million over 2 years. And again, most of what the conversation we're going to have now are what do we think the Dodgers will do? Matt, in your estimation, 2 for 24 for Turner, how do you think that one plays out?
Yeah, in terms of the financials, I mean, with Turner and really any free agents, I don't know. Like nothing would
Yeah,
really surprise me, honestly. Like I could see one team coming in and saying, you know what, we really want Justin Turner, we really want Joc Peterson. Here's not maybe not blow every other offer out of the
yeah,
water, but make an aggressive offer. And I know MLB Trade Rumors, they did their best with the projections for that and arbitration. And it's a tricky season because,
yeah.
especially with arbitration, right? Because you look at the production over a full year, but obviously they only played 60 games. Some teams even less because of cancelments, uh, cancellations, excuse me. So in terms of financials, I'm not sure how that'll shake out, but I do think 2 years for Turner does sound about right, and I do think the Dodgers try to re-sign him, and I think it's important that they re-sign him. Uh, what he brings to the team is obviously it kind of speaks for itself. I mean, everybody raves about him in the clubhouse as well. He's an important figure with the community, and I think that's something. I think those are all things the Dodgers really value. And if you're concerned maybe about third base and his age, even though he played a great third base this year, you probably have the DH coming, if not next year. I know there. I think that they will end up coming to
Yeah.
an agreement that the DH sticks around next year. But then definitely for the following season, when they're going to have a new CBA, it should be in there. So then you could have a year of Turner at more DH maybe instead of third base.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the DH is actually a really big thing when it comes to this because,
Yeah.
again, not to the point where it's like Turner's a terrible third baseman, but he's getting older, and obviously that's going to regress a little bit. As well as I think they just have guys like Edwin Rios that you want to get playing time for. And that's probably not going to be in left field so much with AJ Pollock. It's probably not going to be at first base with Max Muncy. So third base is kind of the only openings, maybe second base, depending on Gavin Lux and your thoughts there. And he obviously, Rios doesn't play second base, so that's not really an option for them. So I think that's a big one. If there is no DH, I personally, it would change the way I would approach Justin Turner this offseason. But all that said, his number I thought was the most reasonable, if not like below value of
Yeah.
anyone. Some of these other numbers I'll throw out from MLB Trade Rumors, I think you'll see are like, oh, okay, I'm not totally comfortable paying that. I think $12 million a year for Turner is a pretty good deal. So for me, yeah, I think the Dodgers, if I'm making a prediction of what I think the Dodgers will do, I think they're going to re-sign Turner. It sounds like you're in the same boat there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Joc Peterson is number 2. Now, these are based on MLB Trade Rumors. They rank the top 50. So Joc Peterson was the second best among Dodgers. They've got him for $9 million a year for 2 years for Joc Peterson. I'll start. This one's not, I'm not interested in this one. I love Joc. I think he's great in the postseason. I think at that number, though, I'm not anywhere near interested.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. The Dodgers really, some of it is just a byproduct. They have a logjam of outfilders. I
Yeah.
mean, they have guys in the minors too who are going to be ready for 2021, probably, possibly, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't know if Jock wants another season of kind of basically being a platoon player. And I
Yeah.
don't fault him for that. Like, I'm not saying that as to be critical in any sense. He might just want an opportunity to play every day, whether it's in left field or as a DH, maybe in the American League if the National League doesn't keep it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see the Dodgers re-signing him.
And I think I think that is. I can't imagine Joc Peterson is like eager to resign. I'm sure he loves the guys, but it's got to be so frustrating. He clearly believes that he's an everyday player. The Dodgers clearly don't believe he is.
Yeah.
He knows they tried trading him a year ago. So and he won the World Series. So it's like it's not like he feels the need to go chasing a ring in the same way some others. So both of us predicting no for Joc Peterson. Number 3 on this list is Blake Trinan. And what's interesting is, at the beginning of the offseason, I had somebody text me and say, of all the Dodger free agents, who would you most want to bring back? And the answer for me was actually Trinan. Now, there's been some time since that. The MLB Trade Rumors has him projected at $14 million over 7 years. Over 2 years, excuse me. $7 million a year for 2 years. Again, that's lower than the $10 million deal he signed. I would be shocked if he gets that much money. That's solely based on a guy like Brad Hand not being worth $10 million, who I think is a much better pitcher than Trinan is. That's just a projection, but your reaction to Trinan, your interest if you're the Dodgers in bringing him back.
See, so I disagree with you. I think that projection is in the ballpark of what he can and probably will end up getting. And I think some of it, or a large reason for that, will be what he did in the postseason.
Yeah.
I will add the caveat to that obviously it was a shortened year. So a pitcher like him, he's not that he's old, but he's older, probably benefited from less wear and tear. I think he also benefited from the Dodgers judiciously managing him throughout the year, and
Until the end of
well,
the year when they
well,
just
that was
ran
why.
him.
Yeah, that was why they did it, right? They
Yeah,
they saved him in September so that you could throw him out there 3 days in a row in
yeah.
October. Um, he's somebody that I think the Dodgers will have interest in re-signing it. I think, I think they'd be willing to stretch to that 2 years, 14 million ish range.
Yeah, and just to be clear, my thing on Trinan is I really like Trinan. I'd love to have him back. I just think the hints that I'm seeing so far is that the reliever market is going to be so flooded with guys in the range of a guy like Blake Trinan. We'll get to some names later. That I just imagine that a guy in a normal year, he's probably getting a 214. I think in this year, it's just going to be lower. It's just my guess. So let's throw a couple more of these names. I think there's some that we're not interested in. Pedro Baez is the next one on my list, and he's not in the top 50. He's not even an honorable mention free agent. So I just went ahead and looked at the bottom of their list. What are some of those guys making? I've got a projection for Baez of 1 year about $3 million. That might even be high, somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range. If you're the Dodgers, Pedro Baez is available for 1 year, $2 to $3 million. Are you interested, Matt?
I'm the Dodgers. I think I wait to see how the relief market plays out, and who you end up with, whether it's Trinan or some of the other free agents that we'll touch on later in the show. So I don't I could see really going either way. It could get to, oh, we're 1 month before spring training, we still need another reliever. Hey, Pedro Baez is out there. We're familiar. We know what we're going to get. Let's work out a 1 year
Yeah.
deal.
Okay, let me give you. I need 3 minutes of Pedro Baez time here, Matt. Okay, this is probably of all the guys that we're going to talk about. I think I prepped more on Pedro Baez than anybody else. Here's my case for why the Dodgers should absolutely be interested in re-signing Pedro Baez. In 2018, his FIP, fielding independent pitching, basically a projection of like eliminating luck. How good is a pitcher? His FIP, which you can compare to an ERA, was 3.16. It was 3.52 in 2019. This year, it was up to 4.43. Small sample size if you want to be optimistic. I think Baez has been in big moments. Yes, he had a bad one this postseason. I also thought going into that game, he was probably the relief pitcher I trusted the most at that moment. So I think that counts for something. I think he's cheap. He's going to be affordable. He's predictable. He's 32. He's not 38. But when it comes to relievers, for me, so often you see these guys change teams and something like hits the fan. To be able to know exactly what you're going to get out of a guy, to me, I think matters. In 2019, Pedro Baez was the best relief pitcher the Dodgers had, statistically. Wins above replacement. He was the best relief pitcher the Dodgers had a year ago. He appeared in 71 games in 2019. That number is insane. But let me throw some baseball savant numbers. A year ago, he was top 2% in barrel percentage, top 3% in expected batting average, expected slugging, and expected on base. He was top 1% in hard hit in 2019. He was also top 1% in hard hit percentage in 2018. He was top 2% in expected ERA. So I think sort of behind the scenes, there's numbers that are positive for him. So those are the reasons for me that I'm pro Baez. I agree with you. There are better names out there, but for the price that you can get him at, and he could be your 5th or 6th reliever, I think is nice. And I'll just go through just so we have context. Here are the relievers the Dodgers have under contract for next year. You've got 6 starters, so whoever doesn't make the starting rotation out of May, Gonsolin, Urias, one of those guys is going to be in the bullpen. You've got Jansen, you've got Kelly, you've got Gratterall, Gonzalez, Kolarek. Then you've got some younger guys, Santana, Spores, Mitch White, arbitration guys, Scott Alexander and Dylan Floro. So you've got 7 guys who are on the playoff roster, plus Alexander, who I think is a guy they like. Obviously, Caleb Ferguson is out for the upcoming year. So there's some Rule 5 guys that when I talk to Craig Goldstein of Baseball Prospectus, he likes, and they're relievers. So who knows? But I'm just throwing all that out there to say I think Pedro Baez not even cracking the top 50 or the honorable mention of MLB trade rumors is pretty insulting, and it's based on a bad 2020 that admittedly was a small sample size for me. So enough Pedro Baez talk for now, but that's where I'm at. Do I think the Dodgers will sign him? I'm not sure, but I'm obviously interested personally in signing Pedro Baez. So we'll go to the next one. This is the last kind of interesting one. I think it's Kike Hernandez. Again, not in the top 50, not in the honorable mention. I've got him in the same range of Baez, a guy that's probably going to hope to sign a contract in the $2 to $3 million range. We're not really sure exactly what Kike is. We know defensively he's great. He can play everywhere. What is he offensively? Historically, he crushes left-handed pitching and has been benched against right-handed pitching. He's had some years that are better than others. Your interest, if you're the Dodgers and Kike Hernandez, is what?
Yeah, this one's a really tough one for me. I'm not sure which way the team, like kind of like with Baez, I could see the team really going either way. And one reason I would kind of hesitate is Kike. They avoided arbitration for the 2020 season by agreeing to a salary that was 5.9. So on one hand, you would think a player obviously wants a raise over what they were
Yeah,
making the year before, and if that's the case, I don't see the Dodgers doing that.
no way.
But then it ties back to, what is the market going to be? Like, he might not have a choice, right? And
Yeah,
so if the Dodgers maybe are the only team who offer him 2 or 3 years at reasonable pay, then that could be enough. Um, and if that's the case, it wouldn't surprise me to see them re-sign him. I think obviously you have Zach McKinstry, who came up and
yeah. I
kind of
was
had
gonna
a
say.
cup of coffee with the team. I personally don't think McKinstry is ready to take on the Kike role next year. I think he would need, a little more experience in 2021 and then assume that in 2022. And so, maybe Kike just wants a 1-year deal to kind of set his value in hopefully a better economic
Yeah.
market next year. And then it just works out for both parties, because then the Dodgers say, okay, well, now we have McKinstry ready to take over in 2022.
Yeah, yeah. I think the things working in his favor are the Dodgers value defense highly. He's an incredible defender. Obviously, he played a lot in the World Series. He's come up with big hits for the organization. They value the playoff production. And I think they value clubhouse culture. And Kike, I would say, is, aside from Turner, probably one of the top 5 most important people when it comes to the clubhouse culture. At least it appears that way from the outside. So I think you're right. I think this feels like one of those situations where the Dodgers and Kike get together and they basically say, hey, we're interested, but we're just going to let you go test the market. Go float around for a little bit, see what's out there. And Kike, I'm sure, is interested in coming back to the Dodgers. Maybe he's like Joc, wants to be an everyday guy. Maybe he sort of accepts what he is and what he is not and trusts the Dodgers. So, but maybe it's one of those situations where he comes back and he says, hey, I got 3 offers and here's the number. And the Dodgers say, great, we're in. We'll match it or we're not matching it. But I do think Zach McKinstry, I mean, at some point, part of the thing here is not, do the Dodgers have the money or do you want Kike Hernandez? They only have so many 40-man roster spots. Right. And so a guy like McKinstry is on the 40-man already. So if this isn't his year, you've got more guys coming up behind him. At some point, there's a crunch. And they've already got Chris Taylor, who plays a very similar role. Gavin Lux should expect to be more involved next year, as well as, you're not going to put Kike out in left field a ton because you've got other guys like Edwin Rios and DJ Peters and guys coming behind. So I think the biggest thing working against him is just a roster numbers crunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, and I know you brought up, and I get what you mean from saying maybe he wants to be an everyday player. I will kind of counter that by saying with the Dodgers, he still more or less was. It just wasn't at one position.
That's fair.
And I think that that's something Kike has sort of accepted. I do feel the year it was 2019, right, when he was supposed to be the starting second baseman, and he pretty much won the job, and it just kind of didn't work out that way.
Yeah,
he kind of struggled. I think he values the value he brings to the team with his versatility.
Got it. Yeah, I think there's something to that. It does feel like there's a different sort of set of expectations that he has compared to a guy like Joc. And I'm not trying to be unfair to anybody. I don't blame either of them for feeling the way that they do, but that is one interesting. I mean, because Kike's been around a little bit longer too. He's been in another organization, and so he probably is like, hey, you know what? Maybe the grass isn't greener on the other side. He came from the Marlins, so it definitely wasn't greener over there. Okay, 2 other guys, Jake McGee and Alex Wood. I've got them penciled. McGee probably in that same range of $3-ish million. I think Wood's a tick higher because starting pitching. I mean, guys are getting stupid money if you're a starting pitcher. So I think Wood. I have him at 4. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he gets 6. I mean, Drew Smyly just signed for $11 million. Kevin Gossman signed for 19. It is freaking insanity. So I think Alex Wood gets a shot to be a starter somewhere for $5 or $6 million. That's just my guess. I like McGee. I think the numbers were there. I just think he's a number crunch guy. And for whatever reason, the Dodgers didn't trust him in the World Series. That tells me everything I need to know. Alex Wood, yeah, I mean, he I don't know. That one didn't. I didn't really understand why he was around last year. He pitched great in the World Series. I give you a hard time because you loved Alex Wood. You didn't actually, but you mentioned him positively. I made fun of you, and then he crushed it in the World Series. So, Jake McGee, Alex Wood. You want to make a case for either of them?
Not too much for Jake McGee, mainly because I don't see them re-signing him. I think it
Yeah.
was kind of it was they claimed him or they signed him after he cleared waivers and he was DFA'd by the Rockies, and it was kind of just one of those, hey, we're going to do it for this season type moves.
Yeah.
Alex Wood wouldn't surprise me if he's back on maybe another 1 year deal. If the salary is maybe around 4 or 5 million, if it starts to creep up over that, I'm not sure if the Dodgers would really do it. And I think the main reason they possibly would be interested is you're going to need pitching depth and you're going to need starting pitching depth. And we can get into this in another show because it is something I think we will have to address. It's sort of the elephant in the room. We don't know what the 2021 season is going to look like yet.
Yeah.
I imagine they do want to play a full season, not 60 games again. The pandemic situation, it is what it is. It's not great. I mean, it's gotten worse since the summer months. And we don't know about David Price next year.
Yeah.
We haven't heard anything. And so I'm not going to sit here and say he's not pitching, but I don't think you can sit here comfortably and count on David Price being back.
Totally.
And so that'll then, put more stress on the pitching staff. Alex Wood is someone, as much as he wants to be a starter, he's been in that swing role a little bit, so he could kind of fill both depending on how the season plays out. So that's why I do think maybe the Dodgers would be open to re-signing him.
Okay. Well, let's go to some non-Dodgers, and I'll just kind of rapid fire through some of these because then we can get to what we would do. But there's 4 names, I guess I should say 3 names that I kind of highlight at the top, and then maybe 3 other names as well. So the biggest one, the number 1 free agent out there is Trevor Bauer. MLB Trade Rumors is estimating he'll get about $32 million a year on a 4-year deal. This is a guy who has famously said he only wanted to sign 1-year deals. He's kind of backtracked and said, hey, you know what? If somebody wants to give me the same amount of money for 4 or 5 years, why not? 1.73 ERA last year. He was second in strikeout percentage. He's a driveline guy, which I think is interesting to the Dodgers. He's also very anti-Astros, which is a plus in my book. But he said, I want to go to a club that's tech friendly. I want to go to a place that I could win. Dodgers obviously check both of those boxes. He also wants to go to a place that's going to let him pitch every 4 days. So that's why it's like, hey, if the Dodgers could get him for 1 year and run him into the ground, I think they'd probably be interested in it. Whether or not he's interested in that, I don't know. The next guy on the list is DJ LeMahieu. These are not in order. These are just guys I think the Dodgers could kick the tires on. This is a guy who plays first base, second base, third base, 3-time Gold Glover. He finished 3rd in MVP voting this year, 4th last year, 2-time batting champ, including this last year. He's 32-year-old, and also I think interesting to the Dodgers, he's a right-handed hitter. That's the side of the plate that they've struggled the most with. So LeMahieu's another option. And then the third big option is Liam Hendriks, the A's closer who was released. They have him projected at $30 million over 3 years. He's a 32-year-old. He has the best wins above replacement mark over the last 2 seasons among any reliever. He's a right-hander. And we both know the Dodgers need elite. If there's one hole on the roster right now, it's a closer. It's an elite guy that you just pencil in and trust. So would they give 3 years, $30 million to a guy like Liam Hendriks? I don't know. I'll throw out 3 more names. All of these guys have the same projection of 2 for 14, so it's the same as Blake Trinan. Brad Hand, a 31-year-old lefty, velocity on the way down. Every team in the league could have had him for $10 million. Nobody took him. Trevor Rosenthal, same prediction. He's a right-handed pitcher, hard throwing. And then Trevor May is another guy, high strikeout percentage, strong spin rate guy. So I think those are 3 relievers kind of in that second tier that the Dodgers could kick the tires on. What are your thoughts on guys at the top of the market like the ones I mentioned?
Not likely. I think between the type of contracts they're going to be seeking and probably end up receiving, and when you factor in qualifying offers for some of those guys, I think it's just going to be enough to keep the Dodgers away.
Yeah.
The second tier guys, the Trevor May, the Trevor Rosenthals, I think you're more likely to see something there, just because the Dodgers, they have had success in the past of taking, not that they're reclamation projects, but of maybe not going after the top relief pitcher, but a second or third tier and working with him and ironing out something in the delivery or pitch selection, whatever the case may be. So I think you're more likely to see that than kind of another blockbuster.
Do you think that approach changes, though, with where Kenley Jansen is at now? I mean, because in the past, they've had a closer that they felt really, really good about and a guy that they weren't going to move off of his spot. And so going after a Liam Hendriks equivalent, whether it was Aroldis Chapman or, a guy like that, it always would have made things a little bit awkward in who's the closer and who's not the closer. Kenley's our guy. And But I wonder if that approach changes now that they don't actually have a guy in the ninth inning. I mean, and Craig Goldstein, again, Baseball Prospectus, he likes Gratterall a lot. He thinks he's their best relief pitcher next year. But if that's the case, I'm worried. I mean, I like Gratterall. I'm bullish on Gratterall. But if he's our best relief pitcher next year, I think the Dodgers are in trouble.
Yeah, that's an aggressive projection for me. I don't think he'd be ready to really take on that role full time just yet. And I'm glad you asked the question the way you did, because what I have kind of come to believe, and what I sort of will argue with people now until I'm blue in the face, is I am of the mind that Andrew Friedman is not going to extend himself for any relief pitcher anymore.
Yeah.
He didn't really do it ever.
Yeah, except for Kenley. I mean, Kenley's probably the one exception, right?
And then he did with Kenley Jansen. And Kenley was great, but and Kenley was the safe bet, right? Because he wasn't somebody who really relied on a ton of a lot. He wasn't throwing 100, 101, where if that went, then he was in trouble.
Yeah. He's
struggled since then. I do think his heart situation, heart surgeries have played a factor in that. But, it is what it is. He was I think what I would consider a safe bet to give a quote unquote long-term contract relief pitcher. That didn't really work out. Then he did it with Joe Kelly because the Dodgers bullpen imploded. And we've seen how that's kind of.
You don't like the Joe Kelly contract, Matt? I just want to clarify here. You're not big on $8 million a year for Joe Kelly?
I mean, it's not my money, so it's fine. But I think it's safe to say that
I'm kind of ticked, and it's not even my money. I'll say that.
It's safe to say he's fallen short of expectations, right?
Just a little bit.
So I think the combination of those two, I don't see Friedman going down that path again. I think he's openly stated that he believes bullpens and pitching is volatile.
Yeah.
And it changes year to year. And I think he's fine kind of going back to his older philosophy of just, trying to piece it together year by year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, like I said, because I think I have perpetually agreed with you, and the thought just popped into my head of like, well, that Friedman's philosophy has always been put in place with Kenley Jansen as a Dodger, and Kenley Jansen as a reliable Dodger. And you could make the argument that the most unreliable he has been was last year. And what did? They went out and spent $10 million on a relief pitcher. So,
True.
And the year before they spent 7 or 8. So obviously that number, they said no to Brad Hand. So maybe that's a Brad Hand thing. Maybe it's we don't want to spend $10 million on a reliever thing. I don't know. But I think that'll be a fascinating thing to watch because I agree. I think philosophically he's not of that mind. And yet, he also saw how big the bullpen became when it came to, crunch time this last year. And he could not have felt good about just about most of the guys back there and whether or not they could get out. Julio Urias kind of bailed them out. So let me throw 2 names at you in the trade market because I think these are names that are going to come up. The biggest one, of course, is Francisco Lindor, shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. He's due to be a free agent at the end of next year. Estimated by SpotTrack that he'll make about $20 million in arbitration this year. He's a 27-year-old. He averages 5.6 wins above replacement. I mean, this guy is a superstar. Of course, he plays shortstop. The Dodgers currently have a shortstop. They currently have a shortstop who's about the same age. They currently have a shortstop who's about the same age, who's going to be a free agent at the end of next year. So there's that. Then you've got the trade cost. MLB.com ran a story projecting some possible trade destinations. The Dodgers were one of them. I just about died when they suggested the Dodgers might trade Dustin May for Francisco Lindor. I don't know. I wouldn't say I bet my life on anything, but the Dodgers would not trade 5 years or 6 years or however many years of Dustin May control they have for 1 year of $20 million of Francisco Lindor. I mean, you could just pencil that one in. That's not going to happen. I think Dustin May's a starter right now. He has upside of a number 1 or number 2 starter down the road. There's just no way. But $20 million is the other elephant in the room when it comes to trading him. That's not cheap. I mean, you're basically paying not market value, but pretty darn close to market value. So Lindor is one, and the other big one is Josh Hader. And he's different in a lot of ways. First of all, he's the same age, 27, but he's under team control for 3 more seasons. He's not a free agent until 2024. He's a left-handed reliever. The report came out on Monday that the Brewers are looking to upgrade offensively. They're willing to listen on Hader. He's projected to earn just about $5 million this year. So I guesstimate somewhere in the $20 to $25 million range over 3 years is what it would cost to keep Hader around. So he's an interesting one to me because I think the Dodgers have been interested in the past, or at least have been rumored to be. And that seems to fill a bigger hole. But Lindor or Hader, either of those 2 names kind of spike an interest in you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think anybody would be interested in
Yeah.
Lindor, right? I just don't see it happening for all the reasons you listed. If he was under contract, team control, whether through arbitration or just he had already signed some sort of contract with the Indians, then maybe I could see the Dodgers being willing to entertain that because Corey Seager is going to be coming up on free agency. But with those two on the same trajectory,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense if you're the Dodgers. You're going to end up putting yourself in a bind 1 year from now if you trade for him. Uh,
Yeah.
Red Hand is definitely interesting in the sense that it wouldn't completely shock me maybe if something materializes there.
Sorry, Hader. You're talking about Hader, right?
Yes, sorry. Thank
You're
you.
good.
Hater, yeah. It wouldn't completely surprise me if something happens there. Although we did kind of talk about off air when the Dodgers, I feel like when the Dodgers do go to try to trade for some of these players, the asking price is like 1.5 times that of
Yeah.
maybe other teams.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers, they're not going to do that. I think they have. It's pretty clear they have a group of prospects that they just will not trade.
Yeah.
And so that could end up being, I guess, the deciding factor in why they don't trade for Hader. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's at least some negotiations to kind of see, kick the
Yeah.
tires and see what Milwaukee would be looking for.
I mean, let me throw this at you. If the Brewers call and they say, all right, we want Keibert Ruiz and we want one of your big offensive bats that is in the starting lineup spot right now. So I think at the high end, maybe that's a guy like Edwin Rios. If you go a step below him, maybe it's a guy like DJ Peters, Cody Thomas, Luke Raley, somewhere in that group. If they say, hey, that's where we're going to start the conversation is Ruiz, let's just say Rios because that's the name people most know and it's the most expensive. If they say Keibert Ruiz and Edwin Rios gets you Josh Hader, what's your response to that?
I would say Keibert Ruiz, Matt Beatty, and let's find another kind of lower tiered guy that you can have. Maybe even
Okay.
maybe even a fourth.
Yeah. Yeah, like Cody Thomas, Luke Raley, someone in that kind of ilk. But you want to hold on to Rios.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to trade Keibert Ruiz. I think he's going to be really good. But the Dodgers have two catchers under contract they feel good about. And as I've said before, arguably Cartaya, who's like 19 years old, is arguably the best of all of them. And Will Smith's going to be your catcher for the next 6 years.
Right.
Sure. Again, you could have both. But Ruiz is the guy that I would be looking to trade. And if they're looking for offense and they're looking for major league level talent, that would be the way I would go. So, yeah, and I posted on Twitter. I sent a message to a couple people, Justin Lorber, our friend, who's a prospect guy, as well as Craig Goldstein. I said, what kind of value? I mean, is Ruiz and Rios, is that a crazy price one way or the other? I mean, I never know with this stuff. Like, is that like, oh my gosh, the Brewers hang up immediately? Or is that like, oh my gosh, the Dodgers are overpaying? Someone on Twitter actually pointed me. They said, he'll actually go look at Brad Hand when he was traded from the Padres to the Indians. I went back and looked, and it was pretty fascinating because this was a few years ago. He was under contract for 3 years for about the same amount of money. I think it was 3-year, $20 million contract that he had signed. He was packaged with another quality reliever, and the Padres ended up getting the number 4 prospect in baseball back, Francisco Mejia. Now, assuming prospects are increased in value now because they're cheaper, that's one of the reasons is Hader's $5 million versus a guy like Ruiz who will make basically nothing would be appealing to a team like the Brewers. And the no second arm. I think Ruiz seems like a really reasonable place to start. So something to keep in mind. Well, there's a lot there. Dodger free agents, Major League Baseball free agents, and then trade opportunities. So, Matt, I can go first or you can go first. You tell me what you want to do. But if you've got $25 million to spend and I gave you that whole list, where are you spending your money?
All right. So this is what I'm going to do. You want me just to go all three in order?
Yeah, just give me wherever you want to start.
I'll do Justin Turner for 3 years and $31 million.
Okay.
And I know 3 years may seem a bit long, but I'm factoring in the DH, and that was also to help the average.
Get your numbers down a little. I see what you're doing there. Okay, I see it. Okay, so we'll just call it 10 there. So 10 spent on Turner.
Then I do Kike for 2 years and $9 million.
Okay. So see, you went a little above my projection there. So we're evening ourselves out. Okay, so we got Kike for 2, so we got 14 and a half.
And then I know I just got done saying Andrew Friedman wouldn't do this, but I'm operating as myself. So I do Liam Hendricks for 3 years and 28.
Okay. So what does that put us at? That puts us like right at the 23, 24.
Yeah, it was like just shy of 25 million. If my numbers, I kind of played with them a little bit. If I had to do anything, then I was going to non-tender, probably like Scott Alexander or something to get the million.
Okay, so just to recap, you're re-signing Turner, re-signing Kike,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going and getting Liam Hendricks.
Correct.
Was there someone else I was missing there?
No, just those three.
Okay. So those are your three. All right. Now, I think
goes by very quickly.
It does. It does. I think you did this far more like what you just described could very realistically happen. Like I actually think you're high on the Kike number personally, just based on like looking around. But yeah, I mean, I could see them. Again, to your point, I don't know if they'd go 3 on Turner. If you could get like a lower average annual value, maybe they'd kick the tires on that. But I mean, that'd basically be a third year for $7 million, which like, whatever, who cares at that point? Okay, but I'm going to go crazy off the wall here. You ready for this, Matt?
Okay.
Okay, my big move. So sorry, first of all, apologies to the Turner family. Justin Turner's not coming back to the Dodgers in Jeff's world. It's nothing personal. I respect Justin Turner. He's been great for the Dodgers. He won his title. And if money were unlimited, I would love to have him back. I just don't think that's the wisest way you could be spending money. And the reason is because I'm going to take his money and a little bit more, and I'm going to go sign DJ LeMahieu. And here's why I like DJ LeMahieu. He plays first base, he plays second base, he plays third base. Okay, the Dodgers don't currently have a set answer at second base. They currently don't have an answer at third base, especially if my guy Turner is no longer there. $17 million a year. So that to me is like, would I rather spend $12 million on Turner or 17 on LeMahieu? Obviously, LeMahieu's got a couple more years. But again, back-to-back top 4 MVP finishes, batting title, Gold Glover, and he's a righty. I like that he's a righty. Obviously, he's replacing Turner, who's a righty, so you need the right-handed bat. I think you could pencil him in just about anywhere defensively. The defense is a plus. Now, I say that with the caveat of you better not go spend money on DJ LeMahieu if you're not going to re-sign Corey Seager a year from now. Okay, so all of this is predicated on that you have money somewhere set aside for Seager, Bellinger, Buehler. Okay, so I'm starting with DJ LeMahieu for $17 million. That's where I'm going first. Second, I'm trading for Josh Hader. I'm doing the trade that I just mentioned. We're going to send Ruiz. We're going to send somebody else. Again, if you can sign LeMahieu, maybe you feel a little bit better about getting go over Rios. I love Rios, so hopefully not him. But maybe we can get Ruiz plus Cody Thomas and Luke Raley and DJ Peters. Those 4 guys, we send them all to Milwaukee. We get Josh Hader. So there's $5 million that I just spent. So we're up to about $22 million. Now, this is where I fudged the numbers just a tad. And Pedro Baez is coming back, but we're getting him on a hometown discount because people aren't really interested. And if I have $1 million or $2 million left, I'd go for Kike. Those would be the guys that I would target. I like Baez. I think if you can add Hader, you add Baez, you've got depth to your bullpen. Like you said, if it costs me Scott Alexander, so be it. And again, I just don't see the market for a guy like Hernandez materializing. Maybe there's a team out there that values him way more than the Dodgers do, but I just think the Dodgers do value him. They like him defensively. I just don't think they're going to go spend. And especially, I just think outside of starting pitching, I think people are going to be shocked by how little people are making, because teams are going to say, do we really want to go spend $3 million on Kike Hernandez? They've probably got an organizational. They probably have a guy at AAA that they can pay $450,000 and say, we're going to get 75%, 85% of the production there. So I think it. So that would be mine. I would go get LeMahieu. I would trade for Hader, and then I would sign Baez, and I would sign Kike. Your thoughts?
Well, you're losing a draft pick with LeMahieu.
Okay, I'd have to go look, but I feel like they might have. Did they get rid of that deal for a year or something like that? I'd have to go look.
So what? Well, he did. He was one of the players who was extended to, right?
Yes.
Barely. Okay. So then what it boils down to is what draft pick you lose depends on how long, what type of contract you sign, the value of the contract that he signs for, if the signing team was part of revenue sharing or not. I mean, there's a ton of different tiers for it, basically.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm sorry. I wish I had all of it off the top of my head.
No. You're good. You're good. For some reason, I had thought, and anyways, we can figure this out off the air. But okay, so aside from draft pick compensation, what do you think about the rest of those moves? Trading for Hader and pursuing Baez, and obviously you're a fan of the Hernandez move because you were thinking the same thing.
It's good. I still think the trade for Hader is a bit much, only because I think I try to keep DJ Peters out of that, especially if you are possibly going with Edwin Rios. But I mean, yeah, I think both of our teams would win the NL West in 2020. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Fair enough.
2021, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, if the draft pick thing, for some reason, I had thought that part of the agreement was they were going to get rid of the draft pick attached to restricted free agents and qualifying offers. So I could be very well wrong. And if that's the case, I agree with you. I think the Dodgers would be very hesitant to give up a draft pick to go after a guy like LeMahieu. But yeah, that was it for me. Like, especially when you're comparing it to a guy like Lindor. Why would we trade assets for Lindor when we could just go spend that money on LeMahieu, who, you could even make the argument is a better player. Yeah, well, there's a lot to look forward to. Again, as a Dodger fan, it's kind of fun to be in the offseason, especially as a World Series champ, but because everyone is going to be rumored. Like every agent wants you to believe the Dodgers are in because the Dodgers are the big spending team. Every trade is going to have the Dodgers linked because they have the farm system and they have all these guys. So it will be fun. It will be a fun few months as we wait in. So let us know in the comments. Find us on Twitter. I'm at Jeff Spiegel. He's at Moreno 1015. Find us and send us notes. What do you think about all these moves? What would you do with your $25 million? Two more things we'll get to, and then we'll be done tonight. The first is the Hall of Fame ballot. This is an annual thing they release. Hey, here's on the ballot. Obviously, if you're a returning guy, you have to have gotten, I believe it's more than 5% of the vote the previous year. New guys are added every year. Because the Dodgers, especially like 10 years ago, filtered through just sort of like has-beens at the end of their career. There is always a running list of former Dodgers. Two new ones were added to the ballot. Legendary Dodgers, Dan Herron and Shane Victorino, as well as returners to the ballot, Andrew Jones, Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, Bobby Abreu, and Jeff Kent. I told Matt when I saw this list, I said, you better not make me say anything positive about Shane Victorino. I actually don't like Jeff Kent at all. Those are probably two of my least favorite Dodgers of all time. But yeah, I mean, Sheffield got 30% of the vote last year, Manny 28, Jeff Kent 27. I saw people saying they don't think any of these guys are going to get in. Like literally nobody on the ballot might get in this year. But I mean, some fun names to relive. I love Sheffield. I love Manny Ramirez. And Bobby Abreu was a super random Dodger at one point.
Yeah, it's always fun to kind of play with the former Dodgers angle when it comes to the Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah.
I think either last year or 2 years ago, Fred McGriff.
Oh yeah,
was one of them.
I was a Fred McGriff guy because we were hoping that he was going to get his 500th home run as a Dodger, and it was going to be like the most bizarre moment ever.
Yeah, it's not a ritual, but an annual tradition like no other.
Yeah, plus Andrew Jones, who, again, one of my least favorite Dodgers. I saw some guy on Twitter saying, Andrew Jones was this great guy. He should be in. I was like, no. I think it was 2008. His 2008 season with the Dodgers disqualified him from the Hall of Fame. It was the worst performance I've ever seen from a Major League Baseball player. So enough with that. But we'll see. I mean, like I said, some people are saying nobody's going to get voted into the Hall of Fame this year. Obviously, the storyline is perpetually Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and Curt Schilling and guys like that, who are controversial for a variety of reasons of the names I listed. But we'll see. I mean, Manny Ramirez surprises me. He feels like a guy that should get in, but I suppose he's probably got steroids on, sort of tainting his reputation as well. So, well, let's end with this. There was a fun story today. And you told me about this, so I'm going to let you kind of explain what you've determined. But Mookie Betts was part of a draft, and Mookie Betts is now a member of the Harlem Globetrotters, apparently.
Yeah, so the Harlem Globetrotters hold a draft, I guess, every year, and this is the 14th year they've done it, and they kind of will select other athletes from different sports and kind of stars. And Mookie Betts, who played basketball in high school and can dunk, was taken with a second overall pick. So
who was first? Like, who gets picked before Mookie Betts? That's what I want to know.
Yeah,
do you know?
Yeah, that I'm not. No, I'm not 100. It might. I know Chadwick Boseman was among the selection, so maybe he was first.
Okay.
Just for kind of paying their respects type thing.
Fair enough.
But that's speculative. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, that would be a reasonable one. We'll see if I could. But yeah, I mean, Mookie Betts, he strikes me as an unbelievable athlete in all ways. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Sister Margaret Ann, actually, I think was the first draft pick.
Oh, okay.
She, with four other nuns at Archbishop Coleman High School, went viral posting a video during the playoffs cheering on the Heat and Kendrick Nunn. She's a longtime fan of basketball. So there you go. I think she was the number one pick. Mookie Betts second. Chadwick Boseman third. Sean Kirk, a 6'8" forward from University of North Carolina at Pembroke, one of the top dunkers. So that he might actually play. And then selected fifth was Russell Wilson, 5'11", NFL quarterback. So there you go. So good company. Good company for Mookie Betts.
Interesting group.
Yeah. Sister Margaret, apparently. They liked her scouting report. Were afraid she wasn't going to be there in the fourth round of the draft. So you gotta get on there early. Well, sweet. Well, hey, Matt, this was a fun one. We hope you all enjoyed it. Let me plug a couple things. DodgerBlue.com. we started doing our player reviews. This is something we do every year. And basically, we go through every player who has played for the Dodgers at any point this season, not last season, this season. And we do a recap, sort of their highlights, lowlights, I guess not really lowlights, highlights, best moment of the year, that kind of thing. So we've got one per day coming out, and that has launched. So check out DodgerBlue.com every day for a new player review. And then also DodgerHeads. We put out a show over the weekend. I got to interview Baseball Prospectus editor Craig Goldstein. It was really fun. I kind of screwed up the sound, so it's a little bit, you get the back half of it, but he has some fun thoughts on Dave Roberts. I asked him if he had to choose between Walker Buehler, Cody Bellinger, and Corey Seager, who would he choose? And he answered. So good for him. He answered. But check that out. And then we're hoping to do a World Series rewind at some point. If you missed it last week, we did an NLCS rewind going game by game, reliving it. You know, it's interesting to be able to relive these moments and want to. But the hope is to do a World Series one, so stay tuned for that. But as always, we appreciate you guys joining us here at DodgerHeads. Check out DodgerBlue.com and DodgerBlue1958 on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as always, remember, we're still champs.